Wherever you are, we invite you to join us to celebrate the blossoming of spring and new hope, as my parents always used to do. And to honor our esteemed and accomplished guests, Scott and Hella McVay, who were among the first to hear of and embrace my father's dream of building altars for peace. Tomorrow would have been my father's 116th birthday, so we hope that he, my mother, and my recently deceased brother Kevin will join us here in spirit. I would like to acknowledge my brother, not only as the inventor of Kevinizing, but as our most generous donor since Stephen Rockefeller, and inspired so many of you to join him in supporting our foundation. We hope to have an in-person memorial service and reception to honor Kevin on the first anniversary of his death, November 7th, if all goes well with the pandemic. On October 10th, we plan to open a spectacular show in Golconda, the first reinforced concrete building in India built by George Nakashima while at Anton & Raymond's Tokyo office, 1936 to 39, photographed beautifully by Christine Mueller and Pankaj Gupta. This was also delayed by the pandemic. I would like to mention that my cousin John Nakashima finally premiered virtually the long-awaited Nakashima documentary last October, and the DVDs and live streaming are now available through his website, nakashimadocumentary.org. Two of our board members, Catherine Kish and Irene Goldman, who was instrumental in placing our peace altar in Russia, wish to say the following. At the Foundation, we think about a unifying symbol for our work of building global ecological and peaceful understanding. We think back to the tree. The soul of the tree, held in reverence by George Nakashima, gave its wood marked and grained by long life. That wood became planks to be shaped by his vision and artistry as sacred peace tables and altars to circle the continents of the world. These magnificent tables create a peaceful presence that draws people to gather around them and invites them to share their humanity and respect for nature. Our friend Thomas Jung had a dream to create an homage to George and his friends Buckminster Fuller, Harry Bertoya, and Isamu Noguchi. So my assistant Vaishu Ilamakan built a pentagonal coopered base of oak wood harvested from the Bertoya studio as a sounding chamber beneath the Claro walnut burl supporting a Val Bertoya sounding sculpture and the original Fuller tensegrity globe, all lit by a Noguchi Akari light sculpture. We've brought it here for you to enjoy and listen to before this unique collaboration is offered at the Wright auction on June 10th. So thank you very much for coming. Enjoy the program.
This has been a year of great loss, turmoil, and pain for so many in our world due to the pandemic, climate change, racism, and xenophobia. Today we journey towards peace with the Nakashima Foundation for Peace, a journey towards healing on this, the original land of the Lenni Lenape. I offer a Native American prayer. O Great Spirit who dwells in the sky, lead us to the path of peace and understanding. Let us all live together as sisters and brothers. Our lives are so short here, walking upon Mother Earth's surface. Let our eyes be opened to all the blessings given us. Please hear our prayers, O Great Spirit. Gene Knudsen stated, "Our enemies are those whose stories we have not yet heard." We invite you to listen to others in your community who you might not understand or have the opportunity to interact with. This was part of George Nakashima's dream, to bring others around the table to end wars, end suffering, and begin to work together. He knew firsthand, as a Japanese man in an internment camp during World War II, that peace was the only way through. And those gathering around the peace table must be in balance with nature. That includes the feminine and the masculine. Mira Nakashima, who carries on this vision of her father's, brings that feminine balance to this important effort. Hazrat Nat Khan believed the more we are awake, the more we are participating in the awakening of humanity. Please join us today in that awakening.
Greetings. We're so happy that you could join us, and we're very, very grateful. And so, in order for you to have a wonderful experience of our event, I will be beginning with a very short meditation. So please sit comfortably. I'd like you to have your feet hip-width apart and feel as if there is a weight on your tailbone, pulling it down towards the ground. This way your spinal column will be erect and you'll be able to focus now on your breath. So I'd like you to please exhale and exhale out your distractions using your abdominals by pulling them in towards your spinal column. Now we're going to expand our solar plexus as we breathe in new hope and health. Let's do that again. We're exhaling our fears, all of the negative energy of COVID-19, and we're breathing in health and love and peace. As you know, Nakashima built this beautiful space as he became world famous for building things of beauty. And it's so perfect that these cherry blossoms are now blooming. So fitting. Cherry blossoms, the smile of beauty. Nature is happy to be beautiful. So we're going to use the beautiful pink of these cherry blossoms as we breathe in more peace and love, because beauty really gets her fullest value when she uplifts in the service of peace. So again, let us breathe out our mental chatter and chaos, and we're breathing in now the full solar plexus, this pink light surrounding that in our mind's eye by the word peace. Again, we're exhaling our fears and inhaling using the pink light surrounding peace. Feel this peace everywhere in your body, in every cell of your body, as your cellular consciousness is expanding into total relaxation. Peace in your body, peace in your mind, peace in your spirit, as your being blooms beautifully this spring. Thank you, and amen.
Last week, we read in the New Yorker magazine that from the 9th century, Japanese poets were celebrating the cherry blossom viewing peak each year. Using these records, researchers have established that last month were the earliest blossoms in 1,200 years. The cherry trees are telling us. The poets and scientists observing them are trying to tell us something of utmost importance about our living planet Gaia, about, in the words of inventor-poet Buckminster Fuller, our spaceship Earth, and our critical roles as stewards in a time of global warming. Our first Peace Foundation Award recipient, the Reverend James Parks Morton, served as Dean of the Cathedral St. John the Divine in New York City, where he consecrated the first Nakashima altar to peace on New Year's Eve, 1986. I was fortunate to be present with George and his family and friends on that auspicious occasion. Dean Morton had been active in both the civil rights, interfaith, and ecological movements, and was known as the Green Dean. He turned the cathedral into a spiritual lighthouse for the entire city of New York. An annual celebration with the Paul Winter Consort started at the cathedral under his stewardship, holding the first Earth Mass, Missa Gaia, and then the annual winter solstice celebrations, which featured world music and an international cast of musicians and dancers. And I would add not only international but interspecies, for Paul had written a song called Ocean Child, which incorporated whale songs. My encounter with Paul Winter began at the Lindisfarne Association in Manhattan, which is also where I met Dean Morton, a remarkable group of scientists, spiritual teachers, poets, thinkers, gathered together at the invitation of cultural historian William Irwin Thompson, who was also a poet. He saw the coming emergence of a new planetary culture, and that Zen Center in Green Gulch, California, the Findhorn Foundation in Scotland, Arcasanti in Arizona, and Oroville in South India were seed formations. The Oroville community was an outgrowth of the evolutionary spiritual vision of Sri Aurobindo and his co-worker, Mira Alfasa, whom Sri Aurobindo recognized as his co-equal. She managed the community of disciples gathering around them, while he focused on his integral yoga and his magnum opus, his spiritual autobiography, based on an Indian legend of love conquering death, his epic poem, Savitri. Out of their vision came Oroville, an international community dedicated to human unity, which is home to the Nakashima Peace Table for South Asia. So we see an earlier World Wide Web linking George Nakashima, who lived at the Sri Aurobindo ashram in India when building the Golconda dormitory in the 30s, who later named his daughter after Mira. And this Mira carries on her father's legacy, which today honors Scott McVay, who co-discovered and recorded those whale songs Paul Winter incorporated into a celebration of our natural world in the sacred space of St. John the Divine in Manhattan. George Nakashima had shared his vision of the sacred peace tables with Scott and Hella early on, and you can appreciate the wonderful affinity between these neighbors in New Hope, whose friendship goes back to 1958. Scott came from a love of language and literature at Princeton, graduating in 55, and did a stint in the Army and was rewarded for his service with meeting his bride-to-be, Hella, in Germany. He moved into the sciences with John Lilly and his dolphin and whale language research in Florida. Scott's fascination with cetaceans weaves back to Princeton, on to the Robert Sterling Clark Foundation, then the Geraldine R. Dodge Foundation, promoting the study of Chinese language and the U.S. educational system, and then to hosting our best thinkers and artists as president of the Chautauqua Institution. But this foundation man's foundation is his family. They were world travelers with global interests. Their daughters, Catherine and Cynthia, constantly come up in conversation as the proud parents celebrate their accomplishments. Scott wants for all of us what he found in his relationship with Hella: companionship, complementarity, deep listening and meaningful communication, and most importantly, love. He dedicates his book of poetry, Whales Sing and Other Exuberances, to her. Without Hella, nothing. With Hella, everything. And elsewhere states that Hella, Catherine, and Cynthia are the center of his life. You can get a kind of retrospective of the company they kept over the years in Scott McVay's book, Surprise Encounters with Artists and Scientists, Whales, and Other Living Things. You'll discover that Hella is a mathematician and photographer. She chaired the mathematics departments in public and private schools and founded the nonprofit Natural Foods Emporium, the Whole Earth Center in Princeton in 1970, and served for many years as its president. She worked with Alonzo Church on the Journal of Symbolic Logic at Princeton, and also at the Siemens Research Lab at the President's Office. Hella also spent years volunteering with Planned Parenthood in Trenton. Together, they established the Scott and Hella McVay Poetry Trail in the Greenway Meadows Park, a 1.5-mile walk featuring numerous poets from many countries, male and female, a natural outgrowth of their work on the Dodge Poetry Festival. And I encourage you to look up the introductory video to see the two of them sharing their work and vision. Our lives are intertwined, Scott says, and their wedding bands are engraved, "Whoever loves, wins." The Nakashima family and foundation, our local, national, and international community, and numerous institutions have all benefited profoundly from their partnership, and so I ask Mira Nakashima to present our second Nakashima Foundation for Peace Award to Scott and Hella McVay.
Scott McVay and Hella, I would like to present you with the second Nakashima Foundation for Peace Award.
Oh my goodness.
Is
Oh my
that,
God. It's so beautiful.
our grandchildren will fight over it.
You know, certain things go beyond words, and you can't find the words to say what's in your heart, but my heart is beating like one of these butterflies that you have in the middle of this. You overwhelm us.
No, thank
We're
you
so
so
grateful.
much. Oh no, thank you for everything.
Oh my goodness. Focus on the wood.
We'll soft focus it.
Well, first of all, thank you, Mira Nakashima, for an overwhelmingly beautiful piece of wood. Maple burl. It stops the thoughts and makes the heart run. Well, Sundarananda, one who delights in the beautiful. On George Nakashima's 33rd birthday, June 24, 1938, Sri Aurobindo and Mother Mira gave George the name Sundaranda, which means one who takes delight in the beautiful. How befitting, as his daughter noted, for an architect. But how can one understand the artist, woodworker, and architect, the source of master works in wood, rough-edged tables, grass and conoid chairs, cabinets, lamps? In a mass-produced assembly line culture for furniture, why should fabulous work by hand be cherished and treasured beyond and above the few others who also do this work? Well, it gives you goosebumps. Shivers of the divine that is possible in human creations. George had written us on August 8, 1983, a long handwritten letter, Dream for Altar for Peace, with sketches. In a cover note he wrote, "The log is terribly real, and I feel a great responsibility," which led me to write a poem for the rededication of the first altar at the Cathedral of St. John the Divine, June 7th, 2009. Now, there's a slight seeming diversion. A startling discovery has occurred in recent years, which George Nakashima had intuited. Trees appear to communicate to communicate and cooperate through subterranean networks of fungi. What are they sharing with one another? The pioneer leading a phalanx of biologists who seek full understanding is Professor Suzanne Simard of the University of British Columbia. In a TED Talk 5 years ago, she called the oldest, largest, most interconnected trees in the forest mother trees. Like George, who as a boy roamed the mountains of the state of Washington, Suzanne Simard, as a girl, climbed in the primary forests of the Pacific Northwest, that is southeast Canada. On May 4th, Knopf published Simard's book, Finding the Mother Tree. Some of you may know and have read Richard Powers' 2019 Pulitzer Prize-winning book, The Overstory, which contains something of her story. Some of Simard's peers were perplexed as to why trees of different species would help one another at their own expense, an extraordinary level of altruism that seemed to contradict the core tenets of Darwinian evolution. By searching for hints of interdependence in the forest floor, Simard had inadvertently provoked one of the oldest and most intense debates in biology. Is cooperation as central to evolution as competition? George would embrace this idea as if it were his own, since he lived this idea with deep friendships from every stage of his life, and the fungal roots illuminate his work in wood. My poem, The Log is Terribly Real, ends, in her book, Nature, Form, and Spirit, Mira caught something of her father, an Eagle Scout, with a wee grin and a twinkle in his eye. Work for him was a spiritual calling, a linking of his strength to a transcendental force, a surrender to the divine, a form of prayer. As George said, peace is more than the absence of war. It is a creative spirit, a great light that can ultimately take over the world. Still, how wrap one's mind and heart around who George was and is, except through his work and his book, The Soul of a Tree, published in 1981. We have an inscribed copy dated September 1981, number 81 in a series of 100. That book, with its drawings and photographs and first-person account, takes you inside the man who is reaching for and aiming to attain a level of beauty and joy and perfection beyond easy reckoning. His explorations as a boy of mountains in Washington provide hints of his strivings in Paris, Japan, India, and right here with wood. Yet that's only half the story. His daughter Mira has written a book of complementary consequence, Nature, Form, and Spirit, The Life and Legacy of George Nakashima, 2003, 22 years later. Her gorgeous book, beautifully written, provides insights and revelations that take you to the source and the critical influences. From Japan, Corbusier, Yanagi, that shaped every day of his life right here. Not only that, she acknowledges at the outset, I discovered far more about my father than I had ever imagined. Mira excelled in mathematics, science, and languages at nearby Salisbury School. Mira earned a degree in architecture at Harvard, followed by a master's degree in architecture at Waseda University in Japan. In the frail, tenuous period after her father's death in 1990, Mira managed to keep the shop going against steep odds by taking charge, being nourished by such clients as Tom Donnelly, originally from Australia, who had some rare woods. She persevered through lean times on the divine mission of continuing the work and burnishing the legacy of encouraging and enabling a more peaceful planet. How did we connect with the Nakashimas? Well, Helen and I had in spring 1958 bought major signed pieces of furniture in teak and oak from Hans Wegner in Copenhagen, a dining table, 2 bare chairs, a sideboard, a nest of tables, a sewing table. When we came to America, we both took jobs at Princeton University, Helen Mathematics Library, where she routinely served and glimpsed every afternoon her math gods who gathered for tea, a few for go, like Kurt Gödel, Andrew Weil, and Solomon Bachner, who came in from the Institute for Advanced Study. We wondered what the American analog in furniture was to Hans Wegner of Denmark. Within weeks, we met George and Marion here on Aquatung Road. What a thrill and a surprise. We were enchanted by the singular beauty and quality of the woodwork, the external mural by his dear, dear friend Ben Shahn, and the integrity of the family compound. At first visit, we saw and felt that George was a woodworker for the ages. The genesis of my fascination with whales, the discovery and analysis with Hella of the songs of humpback whales, leading 2 Arctic expeditions to study, record, and film the majestic bowhead whale, was reading Moby Dick under Lawrence Thompson, the biographer of Robert Frost. Benton Lee Spruance, the great Philadelphia artist, was given key quotations from Melville's opus by Thompson, the lead authority then on Moby Dick. The Passion of Ahab was published in 1968 with 26 lithographs, Spruant's major work with texts by Thompson. The first, in Ishmael's voice, says, "Now, as the business of standing mastheads ashore or afloat is a very ancient and interesting one, let me make a clean breast of it here, and frankly admit I kept but sorry guard with the problem of the universe revolving in me. How could I? I bought one of these large lithographs, a proof for the thrust of Death of Ahab, 1966, for George for framing. He did a magnificent job with a white hardwood. We were thrilled. On a bitter, cold day in early February 1981, our beloved home on Province Line Road was burned to the ground. An absolutely shattering day. We lost everything at the 22-and-a-half-year mark in our marriage. Miraculously, this work, this heavy, massive frame, survived. 2 little cross nubbins of wood on top burned off. George sanded them down. 2 extended wood ribbon nubbins remain to this day intact on each side. Starting over like the Krosnicks in Melody Woods 9 years later, we began by buying 4 new chairs, first designed in 1955, and 4 straight-back chairs. On August 9th, 1983, our 25th anniversary, Helen and I took a balloon ride at dawn from just north of Lambertville. It was exciting being carried by the wind, east by southeast, deer bounding across hill and meadow, mist lifting and birds flying about. The hours seemed like a full day, rich with infinite sensations. We landed in a farmer's field and in the old French custom, uncorked a bottle of champagne for a farmer and for us. We then drove across the Delaware River for breakfast at Mother's, George's favorite local restaurant. We then drove to the shore, Island Beach State Park, for a day of swimming, sunning, and beach walks, crowned by one of Helen's delicious picnic lunches. Upon returning home, our mailbox contained a single letter, not the usual bilge of bills. and promotions. It was a long handwritten letter from George wherein he said a piece of English walnut had come into his possession that he felt was singular in the last 100 years, maybe in the life of the planet. A sketch showed how he thought a peace altar or table might be made from it. He showed further a sketch of a catwalk over the water to a Bucky Fuller geodesic dome that might house the peace altar and look like a sphere of the earth with its reflection. The next day I called George to see if we might raise a little money to make this happen. George said, "No, I just wanted to know what you thought." On New Year's Eve, 1986, the first great peace altar was finished, delivered to the Cathedral of St. John the Divine in New York, lifted by the entire staff there from a flatbed truck, and dedicated by the Dean, Reverend James Park Morton. The cathedral underwent major restorations while the peace altar was safely stored. Then it was rededicated on June 7, 2009. At Mira's request, I invited Paul Winter, the soprano saxophonist in residence, who has organized the winter and summer solstices at the cathedral for decades, which are now broadcast planet-wide, to play, and he did. When Dean Morton received the first Nakashima Peace Award in 2015, I was honored to speak on that occasion when this sacred place became a National Historic Landmark. Understand also, the prior year, it was a World Monument site. How long will it be before it becomes a UNESCO World Heritage Site? There are now 1,073 World Heritage Sites, 19 in Japan, 4 are natural, 38 in India, 7 natural. The first sentence of The Soul of a Tree is, a tree provides perhaps our most intimate contact with nature. A tree sits like an avatar, an embodiment of the immediate, far beyond the pains of man. William Blake wrote, "A fool sees not the same tree that a wise man sees, and hold fast to the thought of the Dalai Lama. Buddha himself was not born in a palace, but under a tree. He attained enlightenment under a Bodhi tree. When he passed, it was under a tree." But let us say that the spiritual forces at work to save this blue-green orb from pummeling we are delivering through our out-of-control numbers, ravaging the primary forests, spraying toxins and pesticides on farmlands and lands and lawns, the spiritual forces of a gentler ethic and ethos are at work, albeit late in the day. The plants and animals are critical to our survival. If all the critters in the sea gag on our plastics, we are finished, too. A fresh awakening accompanies this fresh miracle of spring. Hope is in the air and crackling with promise. In the Garden State of New Jersey, the most crowded of 50 states with more than 1,000 persons per square mile, more crowded than even Japan or India, we are setting our sights on 50% of the land in farms, preserves, and parks. It is hard to hold in the mind's eye that George and Marion were among the 120,000 loyal Japanese Americans who, with their infant daughter Mira, were sent in 1942 to remote camps. Where? Minidoka, Idaho, where 9,000 were housed. Luckily, Gentaro Hikagawa, trained in traditional Japanese carpentry, was one of them. George, with Gentaro, sought to make their sparse quarters more habitable and pleasant through scraps of wood and bitterbrush scavenged from the desert. George would use such tools later in making masterworks. Hardly anyone protested this outrageous incarceration. Fred Korematsu of Oakland, Maryland, refused to obey the presidential order and sued the United States. Korematsu eventually won the suit with major ramifications. In 1998, President Clinton presented him the nation's highest civilian honor, the Presidential Order of Freedom. In 2002, Fred Korematsu visited us at Chautauqua one evening at our home, an evening we'll long remember. He was a seemingly ordinary, everyday gentleman whose action contributed to modest reparations at war's end to all who were incarcerated. Now, with the recent spate of peaceful demonstrations nationwide on behalf of Asian Americans, at Princeton, a couple weeks ago, 3,000 gathered on Heinz Plaza where Mira spoke in fall 2019. And she spoke so eloquently. I just read that again this morning. To protest the hate felt and experienced routinely by Asian Americans. We have further reason to celebrate the Nakashimas who show the way to create beauty and peace. Thank you.
So one of the yearly gatherings that Dean Morton established at the cathedral was in honor of Thanksgiving. And one of the speakers who was often there was Jake Swamp, a Mohawk elder. And he expressed his pain, his anguish at the desecration of Mother Earth and all that was taking place. Where was he to look? He said, since the humans have seemingly become so confused that they're just adding more and more trouble to the planet. He says, we are standing with the animals. George was standing with the trees. Scott and Hella share this perspective. They've been relentless in having us take off the rose-colored glasses, take our heads out of the sand, and take a deep look at the horrors that we're inflicting upon the planet. And looking to nature closely to see the healing we can receive and the teaching that we can receive from the flora and the fauna from our beloved world. Another speaker at this Thanksgiving gathering every year was Oren Lyons, chief of the Onondaga. And I can remember one interview he was having with Bill Moyers. And Bill was playing devil's advocate and saying, "Don't you get it, Orrin? You're a conquered people. It's over. Give up on thinking you can maintain Native American traditions. Join the party. I mean, it's a new world." And Orrin replied, "We're still here. There has been an attrition, but there's also a distillation." In the 1930s, George was traveling the world. Lots of questions, no answers. Feeling that attrition deeply. When he arrived in Pondicherry, he found the answers to his questions. He found a distillation. Scott and Hella also traveled to Pondicherry and made contact with those teachings and experienced that distillation. Scott and Hella, your gift to us is your life. You're living that paradox, that tension between a devolving humanity and an evolving humanity. We look to you as an example, as a testimony for us to emulate. And we thank you.